They called me Numbers back then. Not because I was some Wall Street prodigy, though I like to imagine that, but because I could spot a missing cent in $1 million ledger faster than most guys could find their own desk. I was 24, fresh out of NYU with a degree in economics, and I thought the world was going to hand me a golden key just because I knew how to calculate net present value in my sleep. My suit was a size too big, bought on clearance from a department store in Queens. My tie was a loud navy and red stripe that screamed rookie. My shoes hurt, my hair was slicked back with enough gel to survive a hurricane, and my briefcase was empty except for a sandwich and a yellow legal pad. But the thing about being 24 is you don't know you look ridiculous. You think you look like Gordon Gekko. When I first stepped into Dunlop and Carter, the noise hit me like a freight train. Phones rang constantly, that sharp, old-school clack of multiple lines being switched. Traders shouted numbers in the headsets as if the market would listen better if they were louder. Fax machines spat out curling pages of data that already felt outdated the moment they printed. And underneath it all, the smell. Burnt coffee, paper, cheap cologne, and desperation. The 90s on Wall Street was a different beast. This was before smartphones, before high-frequency trading. Deals were made over long lunches and whispered in smoky bars. And half the time, you didn't know if the guy across from you was your partner or your competition. Probably both. I was the lowest rung on the ladder, a junior analyst, which meant I got the worst jobs, cleaning up messy spreadsheets, running to the print shop at 2 a.m., and pretending not to notice when a senior trader poured vodka into his coffee mug before the morning meeting. But I loved it. I was in the building. I shared a cubicle with a guy named Frankie, who'd been there 5 years and still had junior in his title. He warned me early on, "Kid, you want to survive here? Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and never, ever trust anyone who offers you a tip for free." My first month was a blur of numbers, coffee, and late nights. I'd crash in my tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, wake up at 5 a.m., and do it all over again. Sleep became optional. The adrenaline was addictive. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. David Lang, the senior trader everyone both feared and worshipped, stopped by my desk. Lang was in his early 40s, with steel gray hair and a permanent tan that said weekends in the Hamptons. His suits were custom, his watch worth more than my student loans. And he had this way of smiling at you like he'd already figured out how to use you to make money. He dropped a thick manila folder onto my desk without breaking stride. "Run the numbers," he said. "All of them. I want projections, risk analysis, the works. And kid," he paused just long enough to let me feel the weight of his attention, "don't screw it up." I stayed all night at the office. Frankie went home hours earlier, but I couldn't tear myself away. I pored over every sheet, cross-checking data, crunching figures on my calculator until the rubber button stuck. My tie ended up draped over my chair, my sleeves rolled up, my eyes red from staring at the green glow of my monitor. By the time I finished, the sun was rising over Manhattan. The skyline looked like gold against the pink morning haze. I slid my report onto Lang's desk before he even walked in. That Friday, the firm made a killing on a trade no one else had dared touch. And in the Monday meeting, Lang gave me a nod. Just one. But on Wall Street, a nod from David Lang was like being knighted. That was the day I stopped being Numbers the rookie and started being Numbers the asset. I didn't know it yet, but it was also the day I stepped onto a path I'd regret for the rest of my life. If Chapter 1 of my Wall Street life was about proving I could swim, Chapter 2 was about learning I'd been dropped into shark-infested waters. After that first big win, Lang started stopping by my desk more often. Not every day. He wasn't the kind of guy who handed out attention casually, but enough for people to notice. Frankie began calling me teacher's pet, though without any real malice. Around here, jealousy wasn't personal. It was just a given. Lang had a reputation, part genius, part predator. He could smell a weak stock, a bad deal, or a nervous trader from a mile away. He'd circle them slowly, politely, until he saw an opening. Then he'd strike so fast you didn't even know you'd been gutted until you saw the red in the water. One Friday evening, when the trading floor had mostly emptied out, Lang appeared at my cubicle again. He set another thick folder in front of me, this one heavier than the first. "Run these projections," he said. Then, after a beat, "Don't ask questions." There was a tone to it, not threatening exactly, but final, like a judge's gavel. So I didn't ask. I worked through the night, same as before, only this time I noticed something odd in the numbers. A cluster of small transactions scattered across different accounts, all tied to companies I'd never heard of. It didn't make sense. The risk was enormous. But if the math was right, and I made damn sure it was, the potential payoff was insane. By Monday morning, the firm had pulled off another massive win. This one was quieter, though. No champagne in the break room, no congratulatory speeches, just Lang walking past my desk, glancing down and giving me a slow, deliberate nod. Same as before, but now I understood the unspoken meaning. You did well. You did exactly what I told you, and you didn't ask questions. From then on, I started getting invited into the glass room, the enclosed office space at the back of the floor where the real decisions happened. The door was usually closed, the blinds tilted just enough to hide faces while letting a sliver of light through. Being in there meant you weren't just another cog in the machine. You were part of the engine. Inside, the language was different. It wasn't about following market reports or company statements. It was about making the market move, about placing bets that only paid off if you knew things before anyone else did, about taking positions so risky they felt like standing in front of a train, but knowing you could step aside at the last second. I learned quickly, learned to keep my mouth shut when Lang took a call and turned away. Learned to nod even when I didn't fully understand the play. Learned that the line between genius and criminal was razor thin and invisible to anyone standing on it. Outside the glass room, the rest of the floor treated me differently. I wasn't one of them anymore. Not exactly one of Lang's equals, but no longer in the herd either. I was somewhere in between, close enough to smell the blood, far enough to still pretend my hands were clean. But here's the thing about sharks. Once you're swimming with them, you stop noticing the water's red. For a while, life felt like one long winning streak. I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of, wearing suits that actually fit, eating in restaurants where they didn't hand you the prices, and walking into the office each morning like I owned the place. But the higher you climb, the thinner the air gets, and the harder it is to breathe. Anna, my girlfriend at the time, didn't share my enthusiasm. We'd been together since college, back when my biggest financial risk was ordering delivery instead of cooking pasta at home. She liked that version of me, the kid who'd skip class to walk with her in the park, who'd blow $20 on concert tickets and call it living large. Now, I was too busy chasing trades to even answer her calls before midnight. One night, she sat across from me at our tiny kitchen table, which by then was buried under a stack of unopened mail in my briefcase. "You're selling your soul for people who'd sell you for $1," she said. I laughed it off, told her she was being dramatic. But deep down, her words stuck. It was around that time I started noticing the irregularities. Some were small, numbers on a report that didn't quite add up, trades that seemed timed a little too perfectly. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence or strategy above my pay grade. Wall Street ran on inside information. That was no secret. But Lang's plays didn't just skirt the line. They danced over it in Italian leather shoes. Then came the day I spotted a 2.3 million gap in a quarterly report I was reviewing. Not a rounding error, not a typo, a hole. When I brought it to Lang's attention, he barely looked up from his desk. "Don't worry about it, kid," he said, casual, almost bored. I wanted to press him. I should have pressed him. But something in his voice told me not to. That was my first real taste of fear. Not the fear of losing a job, but the fear of knowing too much. From that moment on, I started seeing things differently. Conversations in the glass room felt more coded. Files disappeared from my desk without explanation. New accounts popped up in the system with names I didn't recognize, some in places I couldn't even find on a map. One night, after everyone had left, I stayed behind and pulled up a few of those accounts. They were shell companies, all right, little more than P.O. boxes and vague consulting services descriptions. And the money moving through them, it was massive. That was the first time I closed my laptop and just sat there, staring at the darkened trading floor, the hum of the servers the only sound in the room. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just tired, that the people in charge knew what they were doing. But once you see the crack in the foundation, you can't unsee it. A month after I spotted that $2.3 million gap, Lang called me into his office. It was a Tuesday morning, the market's already roaring outside, the trading floor a blur of ringing phones and frantic voices. Lang's office, by contrast, was calm, too calm. The blinds were half closed, casting angled shadows across the carpet. On his desk sat 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of Macallan that looked older than me. He poured 2 fingers into each glass and slid one toward me. "You've done good work, kid," he said. His voice was smooth, low, the kind of tone people use when they're about to sell you something you can't return. I muttered a thanks, trying not to look nervous. Lang didn't call people in for small talk. "I want you on my private desk," he continued. "Bigger trades, bigger numbers, bigger bonuses." He took a slow sip of his scotch. "But it's not for everyone. We play in the shadows here. We see things before they happen. We move before anyone else even knows there's a game on." It sounded thrilling, intoxicating even. But I also knew what shadows meant. I'd seen enough by now to understand that Lang's desk wasn't just about making smart bets. It was about bending rules until they snapped, about moving money in ways that didn't always line up with the official reports. "What's the catch?" I asked. He smiled, leaning back in his chair. "The catch is, once you're in, you don't get to step back out. This isn't a job, kid. It's a marriage, and I don't believe in divorce." I hesitated, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. My mind flickered to Anna, to that night she'd accused me of selling my soul. But Anna was gone now. She'd packed her things 2 weeks earlier, leaving nothing but a note that said she hoped I'd remember who I used to be. Maybe that's why I said yes. Or maybe it was the number Lang slid across the desk on a folded sheet of paper. My potential annual bonus. It was more than I'd make in 5 years as a junior analyst, more than my father had made in a decade working double shifts at the docks. I shook his hand. Lang's grip was firm, almost too firm. His eyes locked on mine in a way that made it feel like he was taking inventory of my soul. "Good," he said. "Welcome to the real game." From that day forward, my world got smaller and more exclusive. My desk moved inside the glass room. I got access to accounts the junior guys didn't even know existed. The trades were bigger, riskier, faster, and the wins, when they came, were massive. But so were the losses. And when we lost, the numbers had a way of disappearing, shifting, being handled. At first, I told myself I was just doing my job, that it wasn't my place to question where the money came from or where it went. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice kept whispering the truth. Once you're playing in the shadows, it's only a matter of time before something reaches out and pulls you under. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was little things, trades that didn't go our way, deals that fizzled at the last second. On Lang's desk, losing wasn't common, but when it happened, we didn't take it lightly. "Markets are like storms," Lang told me one afternoon, swirling the ice in his glass. "You can read the wind, but sometimes lightning still hits you." Except lightning started hitting us more often. And every time it did, I noticed something strange. The losses never showed up in the official reports. They just vanished, moved somewhere else, buried under miscellaneous expenses or strategic reallocation. I didn't ask questions. I'd stopped asking questions months ago. Then, one great Thursday morning, the shark smelled blood. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No phones ringing, no shouting across the floor. Just a low murmur. I looked up from my screen to see two men in dark suits and government-issued haircuts standing by the elevators. A woman in a navy skirt suit followed them in, flashing a badge so fast I almost didn't catch the letters. SEC. The room tensed like a muscle. They moved in quickly, spreading out, opening briefcases, producing folders and lists. I watched one of them walk straight into Lang's office without knocking. Another stopped by my desk, his eyes scanning my monitor before I could even minimize the spreadsheet. "Step away from the computer, sir," he said. I did. My hands felt cold. They boxed up files, took hard drives, printed emails I didn't even remember sending. And every so often, one of them would ask me to confirm my signature on a document. Most of them were trades I recognized. Some weren't. Lang, for his part, was calm. Too calm. He cracked jokes, offered the agents coffee, acted like it was all a big misunderstanding. I almost believed him. 2 days later, he was gone. No goodbye, no warning. His office was stripped bare. Desk empty, walls naked, even the chair missing. Rumor was he'd hopped a private jet to somewhere without an extradition treaty. That's when I realized the full scope of it. All the documents the SEC had taken, all the signatures they'd copied. Most of them were mine. My name, my initials, my login credentials. Lang hadn't just trusted me, he'd used me. Every shady transaction had my fingerprints on it. Overnight, I went from promising young trader to the prime suspect in a multi-million-dollar investigation. My accounts were frozen, my phone was tapped. Friends stopped returning my calls. The same people who'd once toasted my wins now crossed the street to avoid me. For months, I lived in a state of suspended panic, showing up to hearings, meeting with lawyers I couldn't afford, watching the walls close in. I started drinking too much, sleeping too little. One night, I caught my reflection in a dark shop window and barely recognized the man staring back. Same suit, same slicked hair, but the eyes were different, hollow, tired. The truth hit hard. I wasn't falling. I'd already fallen. I was just waiting to hit the ground. The fall didn't end with sirens or a dramatic courtroom confession. It ended quietly, like a bad song fading out. 2 years. That's how long it took for the investigation to grind to a halt. 2 years of hearings, subpoenas, endless stacks of paperwork with my name at the top. My lawyer, a thin, sharp-eyed man who always looked like he'd just bit into a lemon, fought tooth and nail to keep me out of prison. And he did, barely. The charges against me were reduced, which is legal talk for we can't prove everything, but we can prove enough to ruin you. I paid fines that emptied what was left of my accounts. My reputation, though, that was gone for good. Nobody on Wall Street would touch me. I wasn't just out of the game. My name was a warning sign. Don't end up like him. The apartment in Manhattan went first. The sports car followed. Then the suits, custom made, perfect fit, worth more than my rent now. I traded them for thrift store jackets and shoes that didn't click on marble floors. I moved to Queens, into a small 2-bedroom walk-up with peeling paint and a view of the laundromat across the street. I found work at a neighborhood accounting office. Nothing glamorous, tax prep, small business books, the occasional messy divorce settlement. My new clients didn't care that I'd once moved millions before lunch. They cared that I could get their numbers right and wouldn't overcharge them.